After months of speculation, Corbin Burnes ends up signing with the Arizona Diamondbacks, not the San Francisco Giants. Turns out they didn't even try really that hard for him, it seems. And on the flip side, it's not like they're not trying to improve, because we just learned that they did try to acquire Kyle Tucker and Garrett Crochet.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, which now I can say was a decade ago. Been hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, 3 days a week for now. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is by elaborating on what I said there, which is that here we are looking like fools. I'm predicting that the Giants will end up with Corbin Burnes for weeks, and he seemed like a super obvious fit, and there was reports that they had an offer on the table and this, that, and the other. And it turns out they didn't really try that hard to get him, it seems, based on basically based on the contract that Corbin Burnes ended up getting, which was below, like we were talking, okay, it's going to probably take like $250 million or more, given that Max Fried, by most accounts, like everyone thought Fried would get less money, and Fried got $218 million, and so it's like, okay, it makes sense that Burnes would get more, but Burnes ends up with a $210 million 6-year deal. Fried got 8 years, and there's a bunch of money deferred, and so the present day value comes out to actually about $194 million over 6 years, which is such a kind of reasonable sounding price. 194 divided by 6, $32.33 million a year. That's a lot per year, but at the same time, given that Max Fried got $218 million, and for Corbin Burnes you only had to pay under $200 million, that's a pretty good deal. But the one of the keys here is that there is an opt-out after 2 years, and the Giants and Buster Posey have been pretty adamant about not wanting to do this anymore with these short, with these player options, basically, after a short period of time. And so I understand that. However, Corbin Burnes, with the opt-out, it would be opting out of after his age 32 season. Actually, it would be entering, he'll be 30 all of this year, he'll be 31. So yeah, it would be entering his age 32 season, I think. For some reason, I was sick. By the way, I'm sorry we missed all of last week. I was sick. I had no voice. I couldn't speak. It was crazy. But we're back, and we're ready to go this week. But anyway, Corbin Burnes to the Diamondbacks, a division rival, which is just, of course, it seems like if it's not the Dodgers, it's the Padres, and now it's the Diamondbacks. It's just, I guess it could be worse. You could be the Colorado Rockies. Some people in my mentions are like, oh, the Giants are on the same level as the Rockies. It's not even close. The talent gap is like the Giants to the Dodgers is the same as the Rockies to the Giants. Like, it's not even close. The Rockies are going to lose close to 100 games every year, it seems. But anyway, yeah, you're in a tough division here with the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks. However, I will continue to say it doesn't really matter. The Dodgers are so good anyway, it doesn't really matter you play a few extra games against these teams every year. It's not that many extra games. You play like 6 or 7 games against other National League teams, and you play like 13 against the Diamondbacks and the Padres and the Dodgers. So yeah, makes a little bit of a difference, but the way the playoff system is now, it's not that big of a deal. But the big deal here is the news that the Giants didn't really even try that hard for Corbin Burnes. And how do we know this? Well, Susan Slusser of the Chronicle tweeted, quote, I'm told definitively the Giants did not offer Burnes more than the Diamondbacks did. Okay, and so, end quote. If they didn't offer more than what amounts to a 6-year, $194 million deal, granted, the opt-out does have a monetary value, and so that's got to be factored in, but still, call it 210, like with the opt-out, if you're being generous, like valuing the opt-out at like $16 million. It's clear that they didn't try that hard for Corbin Burnes. And she also said in, I think it was an article, Arizona landed Burnes with a 6-year, $210 million offer after San Francisco's pursuit never advanced much beyond initial talks at the general manager meetings, industry sources said. And an offer made at that point did not get things off the ground. And so that was, the general manager meetings are right after the World Series. So this was well before they signed Willy Adames. And so it seems to me that it was kind of either or with one of these big contracts, which leads me to believe you're not, I mean, these types of players who are commanding $200 million, besides Alex Bregman, are not out there. I guess Pete Alonso as well. Although Slusser does continue to say later on in this article something that I'll allude to actually later, but it relates to Pete Alonso and that they may actually be interested. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. But so why were they not in on Corbin Burnes? And Slusser says the Giants were in a good position to land Burnes had they been willing to go over $200 million. He played at St. Mary's, he loves pitching at Oracle Park, and he wanted to play for a West Coast team, but it looks as if San Francisco's payroll will remain significantly lower than last year's approximately $249 million. So she's using luxury tax payroll, which is fine, but it's kind of confusing because people use different payrolls. Anyway, again, I want to point out, she says, but it looks as if San Francisco's payroll will remain significantly lower. So she's kind of speculating there. That whole paragraph sounds a lot like speculation and not so much necessarily fact, but the fact that they didn't pursue Burnes leads me to believe, I mean, it is a hefty chunk of change to add to your average annual value at like $32 million. And so the Giants' current luxury tax payroll is approximately $207.5 million. And so, yeah, if you added $33 million to that, you are looking at $240 million. And she's saying last year it was $249. So, yeah, I mean, because you'd still probably want to make additional additions besides just Burnes. There's work to do at first base /DH. There's possible upgrading in the outfield, maybe over Mike Yastrzemski. And so, yeah, it just seems like they kind of weren't focused there, and that their focus instead turns out to have been on a couple of significant trades that were made. It turns out, according to Andrew Baggerly, the Giants were in on these major trades that went down, the two biggest trades of the offseason. Kyle Tucker to the Cubs and Garrett Crochet to the Red Sox. Giants really seriously were in on those. We will elaborate and hear what Andrew Baggerly had to say about those pursuits in just a minute and why the Giants weren't able to get those done. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by our good friends over at FanDuel. Now, from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. I'm checking out the NFL odds as we speak, and we're looking at Chargers at Texans, Steelers at Ravens, Steelers heavy underdogs there, Broncos at Bills, same story, Packers at Eagles, Commanders at Bucks, Vikings at Rams, that one pretty close. And so all kinds of odds you can check out for the NFL as the playoffs arrive. And so just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, as promised, we are going to get into the Giants' reported pursuit of two star players, but in trades. And that the fact that these players are cheaper is what is of note here, because where there's smoke, there's fire in a way. And when we're reading basically that the Giants definitively did not offer Corbin Burnes more than the Diamondbacks did, and then we're hearing from Andrew Baggarly what we're hearing about their involvement in these trades, that does tell you that payroll is a consideration here. And so, yeah, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. We are going to be coming at you with 2 more episodes this week, at least. Hopefully there's some activity. I do think the Giants will do things, and we're barely a month, plus away from, we're almost a month out from spring training opening. And so stuff's going to happen eventually. There's some big free agents still out there, and the trade market, we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. These were one of these players, Kyle Tucker. I mean, we didn't really expect him to get traded. That was kind of a shock. Once it was reported, it was not a shock that the Astros were listening there, but that's a big name to get dealt. And so anyway, Andrew Baggarly, in a piece in The Athletic, wrote the following in a recent story. Quote, rival executives have described the Giants' new baseball operations group under Buster Posey and Zack Minasian as hyperactive in attempting to generate trade dialogue. And again, end quote. And again, just keep in mind what he says there, rival executives, because I saw there was an article. I don't like really calling people out, but there was an article in like SF Gate, and they said that basically Baggarly was just almost like the Giants were feeding him this information, and that he was just writing it because the Giants told him to write it, basically. But Baggarly is citing rival executives, not Giants executives. And so that's of note for sure. You got to have critical reading here. And he says, so rival executives say the Giants are hyperactive in attempting to generate trade dialogue. Baggarly continues, quote, the Giants made legitimate offers to Houston for outfielder Kyle Tucker and to the Chicago White Sox for starter Garrett Crochet, to the point that they were said to feel a bit uncomfortable with the players they were willing to sacrifice. But top hitting prospect Bryce Eldridge would have been a prerequisite to completing either deal, and that was a line the Giants were not willing to cross, end quote. And so I just have to say, I completely agree that they should not trade Bryce Eldridge, especially for Kyle Tucker, unless you could guarantee an extension. And I don't think that's in the cards, because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Trading Bryce Eldridge for 1 year of Kyle Tucker and having no promises that you're going to be able to keep him long term is not a position the Giants are in. The Cubs, the prospect they gave up is nothing like what Bryce Eldridge might be. And it was more that the Cubs had a starting caliber third baseman that they could trade in that deal. I think that helped facilitate it in Isaac Paredes. And anyway, for Crochet, it's different because there's more team control. I believe it's at least 2 years with Crochet, starting pitcher, had a breakout season. Just want to verify, just 2 years of team control for Crochet. And so I don't think that's worth doing either. And it's pitching, something that you should be able to have an easier time acquiring and something they have been better at kind of, well, I would say developing, but we'll see. They've got a lot of young pitching talent, but it has yet to, besides Logan Webb, like totally materialize into actual impact talent. But anyway, so I don't blame the Giants for not being willing to part with Bryce Eldridge. I don't think it's reasonable for the Astros to, I guess it's reasonable for them to ask, but it's just not a match, I suppose, if that's what they wanted. But I could see the Giants offering like Casey Schmidt and, some of their top pitching prospects, like possibly like Kyle Harrison as well. Like Schmidt and Harrison, because the Astros were looking for a third baseman. But if you're the Astros, you're like not confident enough that Casey Schmidt, Paredes, who they got, the Astros, is way more established. And so they knew they're getting an established good third baseman plus a pretty good prospect in that trade. And for the Giants, they couldn't offer an established starting caliber third baseman. That just wasn't something they have. Casey Schmidt, I think, is very expendable because of Chapman being locked down. And I think Schmidt's best position is third base. He hasn't been good as a shortstop. So anyway, the fact that Baggerly is saying they made legitimate offers to Houston and Chicago here for Tucker and Crochet, and they were said to be uncomfortable with the players they were willing to sacrifice. That does tell me, maybe Luciano, maybe Matos, maybe Harrison, and that would make sense. I think those guys, it would make you uncomfortable, but that I would make those offers for these types of players. But anyway, Baggerly continues to say, quote, until they prove otherwise, both Posey's acumen and Minasian's extensive front office background indicates that they will do so in time. So he's talking about like okay, let me just continue the quote and then I'll give context if needed. They will enter trade discussions as a potential mark to be hoodwinked. It's nothing personal. That's just how the poker game is played, and it's led to a few opening offers. No, the Giants aren't trading Logan Webb, that have amounted to non-starters and time wasters. So that's a super interesting quote. Basically, Baggerly is saying, and again, citing rival executives, that this inexperienced tandem of Posey and Minasian have made a few opening offers that have amounted to non-starters and time wasters, and that the industry kind of views them as having a potential mark on them to be hoodwinked, basically to get fleeced. And that's kind of what I said initially when Posey was hired for this job, that not having any experience, it does make you a little bit vulnerable. This league is cutthroat, and these teams are smart. And, the Giants kind of took advantage of some teams. And the Dodgers, before the league had caught up at all, like took so much advantage of a lot of teams, like trading Matt Kemp, getting Yasmani Grandal, like a lot of trades that they made before the league kind of wised up to some of the, I don't know, they pulled off some heists, and so did the Giants for kind of lesser players, but still, like the Wade trade, the Yastrzemski trade, and others. They didn't give up anything, and they got valuable pieces in return. So continuing, Baggerly says, but Posey is said to be unwilling to treat next season, 2025, as a reset in an otherwise rigorous National League West. Those familiar with Posey's thinking describe him as competitive and ambitious, still determined to improve the roster sufficiently to the degree that the Giants will expect to contend in 2025. Baggerly continues, after the Burnes news broke last week, I texted Posey and asked him what are his roster priorities now given the names that have come off the board. And Posey answered, quote, we believe in our young arms and feel like they are in a position to take some big steps forward. We will continue to look on the offensive side for players that give us a chance to score runs in multiple ways. And then Baggerly says, whether it's the willingness to flex financial muscles or the contents of their player development pipeline or the state of the Major League roster, the Giants remain nowhere near the same galaxy as their primary rival. So for now, here's what their top decision makers have. An earnest desire to improve and contend, the desire to keep putting in the work to create trade avenues, and the discipline to keep moving forward while leaving no stone unturned. End quote. So anyway, I just thought, some really important insights there, and all of it checks out to me. The one thing that was a surprise was that they weren't in on Corbin Burnes. If that is a financial restriction, that would seem to check out, given that they had interest initially, but that was at the general managers meetings, which are like in early November. And they signed Willy Adames in like early December. And so if nothing really gained traction after early November, clear that they kind of shifted priority to Adames. And Kyle Tucker, that would have been a huge acquisition for the Giants, plays right field. There's ramifications. So anyway, that answer from Posey via text was like, they're looking for offense, which, he went into this saying pitching and defense. So is the priority offense? That's what Posey basically said. So we'll look into that more in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a baseball game at Fenway Park this year. The energy and the excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff, so you only see incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which I've done in the past. It is a huge drag. Recently, I was looking for tickets for a concert using the Game Time app. With Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying, which to me is just a huge bonus. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows you the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout, which I can't stand. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, as promised, we are going to get more into the question, is offense the priority now for the Giants, based on the fact that they didn't seem to make a serious run at Corbin Burnes and the fact that none other than Andrew Baggerly texted none other than Buster Posey, who said none other than, we will continue to look on the offensive side for players that give us a chance to score runs in multiple ways. And he said, we believe in our young arms and feel like they are in a position to take some big steps forward. And that's the thing, is like with prospects, you look at the projected starting rotation, and you look at, okay, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Jordan Hicks, Kyle Harrison, Landen Roupp, and you're like, you get a little uneasy. There's a lot of injury risk and history with Ray and with Hicks kind of wearing down last year. Harrison, Roupp, young players, but like, for all you know, like a Kyle Harrison, a Landen Roupp, like if these guys establish themselves and take steps forward, and it's not just them, that's the thing, is they do have Hayden Birdsong, they've got Tristan Beck, they've got Sean Jelly, they've got Keaton Wynn, and continuing on down to look at some of their arms, Mason Black, Trevor McDonald, Carson Ragsdale, Carson Seymour, Carson Wisenhunt. That's a lot of Carsons there. That's literally, 3 Carsons. I don't blame them. And like, for all we know, at the end of the year, we could be talking about breakout seasons by multiple like young pitchers for the Giants. And so it's a risk for sure if that is your rotation going into the year. I just named 5 guys, but I also named a bunch of other guys who could fill in if whoever gets injured or is ineffective. So, if their like analytics department, scouting, sees that they think that these players really are primed for big steps forward, then it would be understandable to focus on the offensive side, because we've been saying it the whole offseason, but there are definitely areas where they could afford to improve. And specifically, like at DH right now, who's your DH? Because Lamont Wade Jr. is projecting right now to be your starting first baseman. And then who's DHing, right? It would probably be Wilmer Flores, who is coming off a really rough season. And besides that, Gerard Encarnacion, like this is just not, if you're like Baggerly said, if you're Posey and you're competitive and ambitious and determined to improve the roster sufficiently to a degree that the Giants will expect to contend, and you have that unproven pitching staff, there's just moves to be made here. And so worth noting that Susan Slusser in that, I think, article said that while they didn't go after Burnes, she said, it didn't advance much beyond the GM meetings in early November. She says the Giants remain in the market for a first baseman or DH too, and Pete Alonso is on their radar. And I think that could be kind of an opportunistic thing where Pete Alonso scares some teams off, and I don't blame them for that, because he's kind of just a bat. It's kind of like, okay, you're Jorge Soler in a way, right? Like, and Soler didn't hit much, whereas Alonso is like a 40 homer threat every year. But Alonso is not good on the bases at all. Speed is not something that he brings to the table. He's not a good defender. And he just hits and hitting, and he's 30. And so, I've heard that the Mets offered like 3 years and $90 million. I'm not sure if that was like a verified report, but also that he is said to be more interested or like seeking something closer to $200 million. So there could be a huge gap there. And this could be an opportunistic type of move for the Giants, but Posey was all about pitching and defense, and also you're potentially blocking Bryce Eldridge from his position that is first base, unless Alonso's like a full-time DH, in which case are you wanting to pay $150 million for a DH? And usually the answer is that's a bad idea, unless they're just elite, which Alonso is really good. He's a very good hitter. I mean, he's projected by Steamer to hit 38 home runs in 2025. He's hit 226 home runs in 846 games. He's just a big-time power bat, and he would certainly give the Giants a exciting hitter in their lineup, but he's going to clog the bases, and he's going to not be the best defender. And is that really what they want to do? So I don't know. I don't think so necessarily. But who else is out there? Well, there's Anthony Santander. That's an outfielder. These are free agents, and Santander said to be looking for like $100 million. Well, whereas another outfielder of perhaps similar-ish value in Teoscar Hernandez got 3 years and $66 million to go back to the Dodgers. And that was accounting for the fact that the Dodgers didn't have to pay the qualifying offer penalty, whereas other teams would have. And if you were to sign Santander or Alonso, you're paying the qualifying offer penalty, which I'm not sure they want to do. And so the fact that Baggerly says that the Giants are hyperactive in attempting to generate trade dialogue tells me that perhaps a trade is the most likely way that they would look to make a move and address that offensive side. When we look at who are the remaining free agents, I mean, I really love Alex Bregman. I know there's the Astros cheating scandal and all that, but he's such a good player, and like so clearly, I think the best player remaining. There's Roki Sasaki on the pitching side, and that would change everything from a kind of perception standpoint of their offseason if they were to end up with Sasaki, and that will be done within about 20 days. We'll know the outcome of where Roki Sasaki ends up, and it could be the Giants. They're one of 7 teams known to have been granted a meeting with him, and so it could be them. But the industry expectation is that he'll end up with the Dodgers or Padres, which, of course, that just seems to be how it is these days. But if you were to sign an Alex Bregman, my goodness, like pencil him in at second base and just figure it out with Tyler Fitzgerald. Maybe he plays first and Wade and Flores DH, like whatever it is. Like, I think if you're able to get a player of that caliber, kind of matches that description that Posey likes, where he doesn't strike out. Like, his strikeout rate is really low. He finds a way to drive in runs for the most part, and he's a very good defender. Really has slowed down speed-wise, but I don't know. Alex Bregman, just a really good player and still out there, and from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And yeah, so like kind of not West Coast, but I don't know, maybe it's near-ish. It's near Arizona, right? And so maybe he'd welcome a move away from spring training in Florida and all that stuff. So I don't know. That's just kind of a pipe dream for me. But there's also Ha-Seong Kim is still out there, and Pete Alonso. But besides that, it's just pitchers. Jack Flaherty. There's Jurickson Profar, but I don't see that as realistic. So it's kind of thinned out, and I want to look at who are some trade possibilities. So that's one of the things coming up later this week. I'll look through and see who are some potential names for the Giants to target in trades, if that's in fact the route they're going to go, which may very well be the case. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again 2 more times this week. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.